Welcome back to our Breakthrough Podcast. I am your host, Renee Taylor, and I'm so happy to have you. Thank you for those that have been locking in and staying with us with this breakthrough movement. We appreciate you liking and following and subscribing. But for those that are tuning in for the very first time, just know that our Breakthrough Podcast is the safe space where we can come together to give you the breakthrough map, to go from breakdown to breakthrough, from pain to purpose, from your past to living your greatest story. And today we have an amazing guest, Alan Stevens, that is going to pour into you and deposit positive energy and most importantly, give you his divine, unique story. There's nothing like a good story and who people are. So without further ado, I want to introduce Alan Stevens. How are you today?
Very good, thanks, Vinay. How are you doing?
I am wonderful. I am so happy to have you. So tell the people, I know your name. I know a little bit about your background and what you do, but tell the people who you are and what you do.
Right, yeah. Well, I'm a profiling and communication specialist, which means I help people to read them or understand themselves first of all, but be able to read other people and know how to change the way they like to be spoken to match the way the other person needs to be spoken to. I'm also the creator and host of the hashtag We Together and the Campfire Project, which is a safe place for both men and women to be able to come along and share their stories, which I've been very lucky to have had you join me just recently.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. I can't wait to see the playback and just to watch all the other interviews. And we're definitely going to get to that a little bit later because I'm sure people want to know Campfire Project, men and women, safe space, right? All these buzzwords, they really want to know what's going on. So we'll definitely look into that a little bit later. But first of all, when you say communication specialist, right? How we communicate and the cues that we're giving people to then kind of communicate to us better. How did you get into that? Talk about what was the pivotal moment when you're like, this is what I'm going to do? And how did you even know how to identify what that is to say, okay, this is what I'm going to pursue and this is my role?
Well, when you say pivot, it's probably more like I've been a spinning top. Um, it's been not just one major event, but quite a few different events in my life. I'm now considered to be one of the world leaders in reading people globally. But in
Nice.
that process, when I started, I wasn't very good at reading people. It
Oh,
stemmed
okay.
through, well, I'm glad to say that everybody who's listening here today, once you understand this, you'll realize that as children, you are all brilliant at reading people. But
Mm.
it's like any muscle. If we don't work it, it atrophies. So as we get older and we change our focus to studies, to sports, to doing all the activities that we do, and we're not focused on reading people, it's a skill that drops away.
Okay.
And in
Okay.
my case, it dropped away fairly quick because I was pretty much a loner when I was a younger kid. My father died when I was 3, and I really stayed in my own sphere. And it
Mm.
wasn't until when I was 23 and I was working with our national telephone carrier, I was invited to take on a new role away from Sydney, coming north to a place called Newcastle, about 160 kilometres north, where I was put in charge of men who were all older than me. My second in charge was
Oh,
38 and I was 23.
yeah, you were young, a young whippersnapper.
Oh, yeah. And I had to get them on side and be able to turn the depot into a functioning and well performing depot. But I didn't have any personal skills. I'd been
Okay.
pretty much alone, as I said. I'd been bullied at school and I'd pulled back from a lot of people most of my life. In
Oh, wow.
fact, in my mid 20s, a couple of years later, when I got married, my uncle, my mother's sister's husband, had told my fiance at our engagement party she could do better than me.
And he said
So
it in front of everybody?
he said it to her and a few other people that were nearby at the time, and she told me
Wow.
later on. And so that's what I virtually grew up with. So as far as understanding people, I just moved away from people and completely lost the skill. But now in this role in telecom, I had to really get to know and understand people.
Right.
Then, as my boys were growing up, I got involved in the surf club and I became a surf lifesaver. And
Nice.
so, in a volunteer role here in Newcastle, in Australia, we don't get paid for it. We're silly people. We just go out and risk our lives for the sake of doing it.
Well, it sounds so fun though, right? So it's for the
It is.
adventure.
It's a great life when you're spending the time on the beach and you're getting to know people. And that's where I started to really moving into understanding that. But in my first year, they taught me into being a patrol captain, and they
Mm.
gave me everybody that nobody else wanted.
Oh,
And
wow.
so
Okay.
that patrol became the patrol of the year that year. And so
Okay.
then it talked me into being the club captain, looking after the whole club. And with that, I
Wow.
kept that patrol together, and they won the awards again without me being involved in the selection. So
Nice.
they earned that right the second year.
Okay.
And all I did was promote one of the guys in there to the in charge. And that's where, in the role in telecom, getting to understand people using body language was the first thing. But now in the surf club, this is in the 80s, I'd started focusing on more engagement with people. And so I was starting to learn new skills as I went along.
Okay.
And then in my late 30s, in about Christmas, or actually in the year of 1991, my first wife decided she wanted to go and find herself, and she left. And I had 3 boys to raise on my own.
Now, when she said she wanted to find herself, she didn't find herself before she got married to you. How long were you guys together before she's like, wait a minute, I lost myself somewhere and I got to go find her?
Well, 16 years that we were together. We're
Oh,
actually
that's a
married
long
for 16
time.
years, so 17 years that we were together. Highly intelligent woman, but never really knowing what she wanted. She was from a big family, and there was a lot of competition in there, or
Mm.
she thought there was competition, and she felt that she always had to prove herself. Now,
Okay. Yeah.
when I first met her, she applied for law, she applied for the public service, she applied for teaching and nursing, all in the
Wow.
same week. And she got accepted to all of them, but she got nursing first of all. And
Yeah.
so she took that up. And then after that, she got notification that she'd passed all the other 3 as well.
Wow. But
And
they're
so,
all just so varied backgrounds.
yeah. So a very intelligent woman as far as IQ went, but never really knew what she wanted to do in her life. It was always, what should I be doing? Not what have I got? And so
Mm.
when she
Okay.
decided her words were to me, I need to go and find myself. And I gave her the sports car, as I jokingly say to people, so she could get there faster. But I kept the boys because they pretty much knew who they were, and I knew where I was going as well.
Well,
And
that's
the main
admirable.
reason was she was a nurse and she was working evenings, and
Yeah.
so she'd be home when they were at school, and then she'd be at work when they're home, and that wouldn't work. So that common sense was that I just took the boys.
Yeah.
And that's when I really had to start to, because I really take my hat off to mothers and also the other men as well who have taken on and looking after their children on their own, because there are a lot of men who are doing it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it was my saving grace. I could have been like
Yeah.
other guys and out there chasing women, or I was at home looking after my boys, and that kept me on the straight and narrow, and it got me a far better connection with my sons. But I
Nice.
also realized I had to watch them closer.
Oh, I know, right? There's all boys in my family, so I would imagine, were they mischievous?
Yeah, well, with the 3 boys, I always say to people, they're chalk and cheese, and I'm still trying to figure out number 3. Because as they say, with the first child and that you create rules, and the rules are created for the second child, and the third child totally ignores the rules.
Right, they are. They go rogue. I know. It's totally true with the boys. My brother has 4, and then I have my first cousin has 5. And the last one, he's like the boss baby. He thinks
Yeah.
he's in charge.
Oh, they certainly do. So that was where, at that point, I then realized that I was working with being the youngest in the employment, being the least experienced in the surf club, because when I joined, I was mature age, and most of the men there and the other women as well had all started when they were younger, when they were
Okay.
kids. And now I'm raising the boys on my own. So naturally enough, it was from in business, in the community, and in the family, raising my family.
Mhm.
So it was only natural that the profession that I get into would have to do with all 3. And at
Mm.
the same time, relationships are the foundation we do of everything we do in life. And
Right.
without building a relationship, you'll have no communications. But
Right.
it's
Right.
getting the communications right with the people, and it's not expecting them to understand us when we're trying to communicate with them. It's a matter of us we have to tune our transmitter into their receiver so they can understand what we're trying to get, the message we're trying to get across. And to do
Mm.
that, I realized I really needed to understand each person I was talking to,
Okay.
because regardless of all the psychometric profiling out there, there are no two people on the planet with the same personality.
Right. Even twins.
That's it. They'll have different experiences, even if they're, virtually, joined at the hip and always with each other. They're looking in different directions. One will actually see something the other one doesn't. One will get the first connection with something than the other. And so that's going to affect their personalities as
Right.
the nature or the nurture part of their traits develop.
Right.
And so looking at all of that, I've looked at it and I went, right, I've done psychometric profiling. I've worked with DISC. I've worked with Myers-Briggs. I'd had a company here in Newcastle that taught currency trading, and none of their students made any money, so they got me to come in. We used psychometric profiling in those days, and in that we found that when people did answer the questionnaire and you put them under a bit of stress, which happens when you start putting money and trading on the stock market and you're wondering about whether you're going to lose it or not, the fears step in and the personality will really come out. And we realized people weren't matching their personalities.
Oh, wow.
Because when you ask questions, people are trying to second guess what you're asking and wondering whether, how they should be. And some of the guys that I asked, they said, well, why? Your personality has come up this way in the questionnaire, but you're behaving this way. What's going on? Why is your questionnaire different? And they said, well, a couple of them were honest and said, look, we tried to second guess, but figure out what sort of a personality we had to have to be a good trader. And that's what we filled out on the form. And I went, no, under stress, you're always going to revert back. We need to know that one.
Right. Wow.
And,
this is such highly classified stuff.
Yeah. Well, shortly after that, I was helping another friend who was running a spiritual retreat. He's got a Buddhist temple up in the valley. I went up there and we decided to do a workshop using the Myers-Briggs dichotomies, the different styles, extroverts, introverts, and did some role playing. But at the end of the day, somebody just said to me, you ever looked at reading faces? And now I'm a curious sort of person. I think it was one of your, John Wooden, one of your UCLA coaches over there, who had said, the most important thing you'll ever learn is the next thing you learn after you think you know everything.
Right.
So I had about an hour's drive back from the valley where I was doing the workshop. And all I did was think about, reading faces. So got onto Google. Thank you, Dr. Google and Professor Google, for all the information you provide for us. I did a search and I found a gentleman who taught the facial features, who did all the research on that. The facial expressions. That was Paul Ekman over there in California, and a lady by the name of Naomi Tickle in California as well, an English lady who worked with the facial features. I trained with Paul's group, and then I trained with Naomi. I actually went over to California and spent time with Naomi and did my master's with her on the facial features. And while I was training with both their styles, I realized that they blended together so well. Now, psychologists look at facial features and get it confused with the old system they used to have of phrenology, which was bumps on the head, and phrenology being about character. Somebody having certain bumps on their head would be a serial killer and that sort of thing.
Oh, wow. I was just about to ask you.
It was debunked as a load of rubbish, but it was the precursor and the leading into the neuroscience. So it had a purpose there for a short time. But as far as personality goes, it was absolutely useless to that. But if you think about it, if you lift weights, you do bicep curls, you're going to build your biceps up. If you don't do tricep extensions, you're just going to have an imbalanced arm. You'll see the bicep, but you won't see the tricep.
Right.
So we know that any muscle that we work over and over, we develop it. We also know, and this is why body language and the micro expressions work, whatever we feel inside, we express outwardly. And as we're expressing outwardly, the end result is, and we're thinking in a certain way, we're going to be pulling expressions on our face when we're concentrating and thinking. So the ridges and crevices that we create on our face become a history of how we like to think and process. There's our personality.
Right. Okay, so like the creases on our forehead?
That's it.
Yeah.
No, these little lines, vertical lines I've got here, because things have got to be exactly right.
I don't think I have that many of those.
Yeah. But see, if I've really focused, and the muscles around the eyes will move in slightly over time if you're focusing in all the time. If your vision's out here and looking at the peripheral, as you're developing, as your skull is changing, as you're getting older from a young child, all of these things are going to change. And so that gives away a history of how you like to think and process but it doesn't give me a character. It tells me that two people can look similar and they can behave in a certain way when they're concentrating and focusing and working things out. But what they're thinking can be completely different because that's their character. So
Okay.
two people look the same. One can be a saint, one can be a sinner. And that's why I realized by putting all the skills together, while I'm looking at somebody, I know their personality, which I can get from their photograph. I don't have to actually see them in real life. As long as I've got a photograph, then I can work their personality out. I know how to present to them. The moment I'm talking to them, though, now I've got the feedback of their body language and their expressions, but also what they're saying as well.
Right.
So
And then you
now,
see if they align.
that's it. So now I can say, have I read them right? Is there something emotionally going on? And then thirdly, are they telling the truth? But I don't use it where Paul and all the like border control and police and FBI and things like that will use it for lie detection. I use it as a truth seeker, because if you're telling me a lie, I want to know why. I want to know what's behind it. Is there an emotional cause? Is there something else going on in your life that I might be able to help you with? So if I'm doing a sale, for instance, and somebody I can see is just not aligned with what I'm seeing in their personality, something's going on, I'm going to get into a conversation and see if I can uncover what it is and see if we can deal with that. And once we've dealt with that, if I can give them suggestions or ask them a few questions where they get their own answers to the problem they're carrying, now they're going to be more open to listening to me and I can go back to the sale.
So
and
question,
not only that, I've got the loyalty.
Right, right. So question, because you're speaking about the reading of other people, right? And really the development of you really working this skill, this muscle, and how you went from different research, which I applaud you on that, because I don't even know the first step. I don't think a lot of people that are listening would know the first step on how to like obtain some type of position or job like this or some type of role. And they may find that it's just too much pressure, right? To have to like detect these things in people and then to call it out, because I'm sure that some people are not receptive to the feedback that you're actually reading because you're trained to do so. So my question is, before you got into that, right, what was the emotional work that you had to do on you, right? So let's go back to some of the things you said, because we can't skate past it. I mean, I really appreciate you even sharing and being vulnerable about the fact that you lost your father at such a young age. So my deepest condolences to that, because I too can relate to having lost my father. And then when you mentioned, being a single parent, right? A single dad, where a lot of times we see women being the primary custodial parent, but you taking on that responsibility and you actually opting to take that responsibility was a huge thing. And then to your wife saying, okay, after 16 years, which is a long time, Ballard, that she said she needed to find herself. You would wonder, right? I'm sure you question like, well, what did the last 16 years mean, right? If you felt like you not yourself. So talk about what type of work you did on you, right? Because some of these are the questions that you've asked other people while you're detecting the truth, right? You said the truth seeker. So how did you discover the truth of who you were and who you wanted to be prior to even making this huge professional step?
Well, I'll start out by saying that, and this is me, I'm not talking about anybody else, but I was a little bit of a coward, because what I ended up doing is once she'd left, I just threw myself into my work and in raising the boys. I kept myself really busy.
Oh, okay.
And so quite a few years passed, and I then realized that I still hadn't worked on my stuff. It was about, that was in 1991 that we separated. I remarried in 99. So in all that period of time.
So you didn't even really do anything. So how
No,
you just got
that's what I said. I was like so many other people. See, the four things that come into when we talk about learning how to profile people. Everybody has suffered or is suffering from the past.
Okay.
At the same time, suffering now as well. But everyone's wearing a mask, and everybody will pretend they're not wearing a mask. At the same time, we're also a combination of all our childhood dramas and rewards. So the end result is that by having this mask on, and I wasn't really telling other people that everything was fine. I was telling myself everything was fine. So I wasn't lying to anybody else. I was just too busy lying to myself. And so I kept myself very busy and moving forward. And I think a lot of people listening to this might, feel that that's something that they've done as well.
Yeah, it's very common. Yeah.
Yeah. And with human beings, we're emotional creatures. This is the whole thing. We talk about the logic that we have, but logic, we're only about 18% logic. We're 82% emotion. All our buying decisions. Yes, I need a car, but which type of car is totally emotional. Getting from A to
Oh.
B, yeah, I need a vehicle, but what type of vehicle? That's a purely emotional purchase. That's about whether you want to stand out to other people, whether you want to
Right.
save money, if it's all about just getting a cheap
Okay.
car so you can keep the money for something else. That's all emotional purchases. And what we
Mhm.
do is we buy emotionally. We usually substantiate it with people, well, justify it by the logic, but the logic's
Mhm.
only a small part of it. So we are emotional beings, and everybody, if you're giving yourself a hard time over it, get over it and stop doing it, because I pressured myself all the way through. I was trying to, trying to let everybody else believe that I was okay, that I was,
Yeah.
I was fine, but really I was quite lonely inside.
But
I
after a
had,
while, you're doing it. Don't you?
mm,
Sometimes you convince yourself, right? Sometimes you
yeah,
don't even realize that you're not
mm,
okay.
yeah.
How do
Well,
you
I
even
started.
transition?
Yeah, I realized that with the boys, if I had any women that came into my life, I didn't want someone to take over as their mother, but I wanted women around who were going to be fine with children.
Right.
So I dated a lot. There
That's
was a lot of women
important.
that I'd been out with. And I know some guys will boast about the number of women they've gone out with, but in my view, and that to have met one at an early age and to be able to hold on to her, and I've met couples who have been married for 50 years, I envied them big time, to actually
Yeah,
have that
it's so
person they can
beautiful.
be so close to for that period of time.
Yeah.
And so I'd had a lot of dating. And then when I got into I was around about 98, I'd met a woman who had used to run a cafe opposite. When I left telecom, started my own business.
Hmm.
She operated a cafe across the road. We used to buy our lunches there regularly.
Oh, okay. So you
And
saw her all the time.
we finally ran into each other many years later in a coffee shop, got talking, and we got dating. And then a couple of years later, we were married. And then, or about a year later, but that was only a short marriage. That was 2 years and done and
Oh,
dusted.
wow.
So
Wow.
again,
Is it because you feel like you rushed into it, or was it something else that was
there
fragmented
was
and
a lot of stuff going on, but I can only, point my finger at myself, not someone else, because,
okay.
what's going on in their mind, I don't really know. But, you have enough trouble admitting what's going on in your own mind.
Right. That's
But I
yeah,
looked at
that's
it and
big of you.
realized that, I found out later on that some of my personality traits that were the trigger, and of course, every trait has an upside and a downside. I know where
Mm.
the strength of the upside is, but I also know where the downside gets triggered. And I could see one in my traits in particular that was, a bit of a problem in relationships. And so once I understood my traits, that gave me more control over that. But that was in the mid 2000s. So
Wow.
uh,
It's
it was long
powerful though.
after that was well after this situation. But right at that point, I realized that I needed to understand more about myself. And through
Mm.
some chance meetings after my second divorce, I'd given up massaging because my second wife had talked me into becoming a massage therapist. When we separated, I put it on hold, and a couple of mates talked me into getting the table out. And I went to a spiritual retreat where I took the table with me and gave some people some the massages. And when I had people coming to me talking about how they'd had out of body experiences, they felt extra hands on their body and everything else while I was working on them,
Oh, wow.
I thought this was bizarre. And
Yeah.
but the mates convinced me to keep massaging, and I started having more clients coming to me, and a lot of them were terminally ill. They were on cancers and on the transplant list for kidneys and things like that. And by this stage, I'd already added NLP to the skills that I had, so neuro-linguistic programming.
Yes, I'm
I would sit
familiar.
somebody down, take them through a process, talk about their past and everything else. And in those days, what I worked on was if somebody's got thinking in a certain way and therefore is making them feel really bad, well, you're not going to change the thinking by thinking about it. So, okay, how does that make you feel? Right, how would you prefer to feel? Tell us about when you felt that way. And you align the thoughts. So you now got new thoughts. And I found with that process, plus also using aromatherapy, sound therapies, color therapies, massage and everything else,
Wow.
that hour on the table after I'd taken them through the NLP session anchored everything they picked up and learnt about themselves and
Yes.
accepted about themselves in that previous session. And I then had people who were terminally ill reversing their conditions.
So you were
And
like healing people. You were healing people from the inside out. You were,
And
wow.
this was absolutely bizarre to me because I'm a technical minded person. All my background had been in sports, it had been in the surf club, it had been in telecommunications. And
Wow.
all of this sudden, this is happening. And through some chance meetings, I met an Aboriginal group and got invited out bush. And that
Mhm.
on the first night I was out there, I was realised I was being put to a test, which
Oh,
I passed. And then they put me through a second test that night, just a few things that were happening with all the other men that were around.
was
I
it
passed.
physical test?
Well, the first one was a physical one. There was a young guy who I thought was a boy at the time, but 14 years old. He'd already been through his rite of passage, so his full initiation. So to them, he was a man. And he was talking about this sore leg he had. The hip was really painful. He was limping. He'd been talking about how he been really that painful. He'd been crying. And I was watching the other men to see their response.
Mm.
And not one of them being smart towards him or anything else, but very, very compassionate, fully understanding him. And I went, okay, something's going on here. And one of the elders said to me, pointed at me and said to the young fella, he's a healer, he'll fix you. And I'm
Mm.
out in the bush, no table, no oils or anything else. So I took him aside and we were standing up. I manipulated his leg. I talked to him and, doing a bit of NLP at the same time. And 10, 15 minutes later, he's kicking a football with that leg.
Wow.
And
This
that,
is bizarre. There's no other word for
it's,
it. It's almost bizarre and unbelievable. And you're
yeah,
the one going through it.
yeah. And see, I got
Wow.
no way of explaining any of that. It's totally confusing to me. But later that night, they asked everybody, there was about 60 men out there by this stage, and we're in one of the big rain caves up in the mountains, away from the rain outside. And they asked some of the people why they were there. And one of the first ones to speak said, I was here a year ago. And he said, I want to help the Aboriginals. And I just watched their eyes roll, the shark
Mm.
eyes as they went up. And I went, that wasn't what they wanted to hear. The
Mm.
elder finally said to me, okay, Alan, now you can speak. Tell everybody why you're here, the same as you told me on the phone the other day. So I told them, and I said, by the way, I've got all these questions. I'm hoping that you guys have got the answers. You're the oldest living culture on the planet. If you guys can't help me, I don't think anybody can,
Oh.
because all this stuff are happening in the massage. And I said, and by the way, I'm not here for you. I'm here for me.
Mm.
And that was what they wanted to hear, because they've got so many people coming up and saying, hey, we'll fix your problems. Well, nobody's spoken to them to find out what they want fixed in the first place.
Right, right.
And I said, look, I'm the one who's got the questions. I'm the ones with the knowledge. I'm here to learn from you, not the other way around. And so that turned into, what are you doing next month? And I said, well, what am I doing? They said, well, you're coming camping again. And
Oh.
one of the guys, the one who had said he'd been there a year earlier, and this was his second time back, he said, why is he coming back so soon? I had to wait a year. He said, he does what you don't do. And he said, what's that? He said, he listens. And so I went, two eyes, two ears, one mouth, Alan. Use them in that proportion.
Okay.
And when you're talking, ask questions. Don't go making statements. Don't go trying to tell anybody anything. Learn. And that's why I got accepted. And that turned into, because one of the elders, he had to show me how to get out to this location. He didn't have a vehicle, so I had to pick him up and we drove out together. And on the trip back, he said, what are you doing next Friday? I mean, you mean next month? He said, no. He said, how about you and I come out every Friday,
Yeah.
stay out, and then that once a month you'll come out with everybody else. And about a year later, what are you doing next week, Alan? What are you doing next week, Alan? I went, well, coming camping again on Friday, same as we've been doing. No, you're going. Was told that we were going out on a Saturday and not coming back until the Sunday of the following week. And I went, where are we going? They said, well, just get in the car when we come. And I went through my initiation.
Wow. Now this is a good segue about, there was something you said that I want people to catch, and I do want to reiterate some of the things that you said that brought you to this point of just pure self-awareness that a lot of people don't have. What I love that you mentioned in this story, where clearly it's a continuation, you're building relationship, you are, you're bringing tremendous value, but at the same time you're gaining. But I
That's
love
it.
that you talked about being inquisitive, right? That's really important, to ask questions. And that's part of your profession, but I love that it's also part of your personal development. You said asking questions, the ability to listen, and really listen for not even the things that you hear. Sometimes, like you said, when you're reading people, whether it be the cues, whether it be the nonverbals, the facial expressions, the creases in a person's face, all of that really has kind of aided you in just kind of healing yourself and putting the pieces to your life back together again. So that is so commendable. And then it's very commendable that even after, one marriage that went for a long time, you still picked yourself up, you dust yourself off and tried again. But I love that you said that in spite of the fact that you might have, buried yourself in your work, as we all kind of deal with conflict and worry and pain in different ways, that was your coping mechanism. But I love that you talked about your responsibility to your boys and how important that was, even with choosing a woman that was going to come into their life. So that's tremendous, because whenever people are going through a hard time, like you said about the traders and people that kind of like switched it up. One minute they're saying one thing on their questionnaire, and then when they're faced with, some type of uncomfortable situation, now it's not correlating to what they might have put in their questionnaire. I like that what you did is you took a horrible or devastating situation and you found purpose in it, and you didn't allow it to get you down. You still stayed focused on what was important, and that was being a father to your kids. And like you said you had to watch them closely. So that was just so important. And I think about what you've been telling me in terms of what you do in your profession, and no one would ever know that there's so much behind the man, behind why you did this, and all of the things that you were looking to gain as a result. So as we wrap up, I do want to say, if there is a man or woman that's listening to this that have gone through some of the things that you've gone through loss, you went through grief, not only grieving the passing of your parents, but grieving the loss and the demise of relationships, right? What would you tell them to inspire them to keep going, or to find the deeper meaning of what they're going through and why? What would you tell them? Look into the camera and tell that man or woman if they're going through these things.
Well, one thing I'd always recommend is to realize there are two sides to every story. There's two ways of looking at everything. While you think that life is against you and it's gone wrong, the more you focus on that, the more you're going to get that. But if you stop and you look at the other side, one thing I didn't mention before was after my second divorce, my first wife had said to me that she wasn't connected to the sons. And I said, right, the way to do that, because she said they don't love me, they don't respect me. I said, well, they do love you, but they don't respect you yet. I will help you get that respect with them, but then you have to maintain it. In that, many years later, by this stage, or it must have been 15 years later again, she needed somewhere to stay for 3 months. And she said, you've got a spare room at your place. Can I be a lodger, separate lives? And I went, as long as it's for separate lives, and 3 months, okay. Well, she moved out 3.5 years later.
Yeah,
the only way that could happen is that I had to look at her differently. Yes, she told me I wasn't good enough to be a husband when she walked out. That's actually what the message I got. But what she gave me in that relationship we had, I've got 3 boys I love and respect that I would not have, and I wouldn't have the grandchildren I've got now if she and I hadn't been together in the first place. So I could love her for that, not need to be in love with her, and therefore I could cohabitate with her and share a lodgings and share 3.5 years of our lives as 2 individuals.
Nice.
That couldn't have happened unless I changed the way I was looking at it. So anything's happening to you, it's the choice you make on how you let it affect you.
Oh my goodness. First of all, that is so remarkable, Alan. And it's so crazy how we kind of like tucked that in there at the end. But I don't know if you guys caught that, but you're hearing this. We talk about the character of the man that then cohabitated post divorce with his previous wife for nearly 3.5 years. And then helped her facilitate this respect with her kids. My goodness, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. And just really keeping the family intact despite the separation of 2 people that are like, okay, we're no longer going to be in love, working towards life together in that way. So that is completely remarkable. I'm so glad that you had a chance to say that. Please tell the people how they can connect to you. Of course, connect to everything that you're doing, and what are you promoting right now that you really want people to tap into?
Okay, well, first of all, the best way to get in touch with me, as you can see my name on the screen there, that's the name of my website. It's alanstevens.com.au for Australia. You'll be able to go in and see the work that I'm doing there and the results people are getting from the profiling side of things. Because in profiling people, you've got to learn about yourself first before you know how to read the other people, and then you know how to communicate with them. So understand yourself, understand the other person, talk to them in the way that they need to be spoken to from there. The other thing that I'm really proud of is the Campfire Project. And if you look for the website, thecampfireproject.com.au, that will take you to my passion project, which is all about helping men and women under the hashtag We Together work together to solve issues without looking at each other as the problem. And
Oh my
so,
goodness,
but
beautiful.
for your listeners, and that I will throw in a free gift as well, because on my website again, alanstevens.com.au / and the word free, FREE, that will take you to a free course that I've got, which will give you some tips on how to read some of the traits and where people's eyes look when they're sourcing information.
Oh my goodness. I think I'm going to go on there and I've got to tap into that. You guys heard it here. He's giving free gifts, he's giving training. He gave so much of himself. I am so appreciative of you taking the time to speak to us today, as you're on a whole nother side of the world, in a whole nother time zone. I appreciate that. And I will make sure that all the information to get contact with Alan Stevens is a part of all the show notes, so that you guys can plug in and get hold of this free offer that he just gave you. So thank you guys for watching again. Thank you guys for listening again to our Breakthrough Podcast. I am your host, Renee Taylor, and this is the safe space where we'll give you the breakthrough map to go from breakdown to breakthrough, from pain to purpose, from your past to living your greatest story. Make sure you like and subscribe our Breakthrough Podcast across all social media platforms and streaming platforms. And until next time, keep breaking through. Bye.